Hello, good morning, everybody. This is good morning for me, maybe good afternoon or good evening. My name is Charlene Lee. I'm an author and analyst, and we're going to be talking about disruption today. And to help me do that is my friend Terry Jackson. And I met Terry through a leadership group called MG100. And we've been having these great conversations over the past couple of days. So I wanted to invite him here today because we want to talk about disruption and how do you do this every single day. And I think the timing is great because we're feeling really disrupted on so many levels today. So, Terry, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Charlene, for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here as your guest today.
Right. So one of the things we were having a chat earlier, we were on a conference call. We were chatting away furiously on the keyboards in the background. Is that you really in your work? Why don't you describe a little bit for people, just to give people a little context, who you are and what you do?
Okay, well, of course, I'm Terry Jackson. I'm a leadership development kind of coach. And so, what I do and what we do is we have a systems approach to organizational development. So, regardless of where the challenge is within the organization, we can enter at any point, whether it's a process issue, whether it's a people issue, because at the end of the day, what it really boils down to is three areas. Organizations have challenges with time, team, and money. And when we go in and we take a look at them, oftentimes it begins with people, right? And so when we're talking about people who are from different backgrounds, um, they all need self leadership, and then they need to be able to lead others as well. And so, as a leadership professional, executive coach, we really work with helping organizations become better by helping leaders become better.
And we were talking about one of the just before this call here started was really what are some of the biggest challenges? And I think one of them is like how do you disrupt yourself as a leader? What are you seeing and hearing? And you were mentioning to me that my book really resonated to you. Why does disruption resonate for you so much these
Yes,
days?
your book really resonated with me. And actually, I started reading the book prior to COVID-19, right? And so, COVID-19 came and all of the major disruption came, right? We were talking disruption before that, but then ultimately, Mother Nature disrupted everybody, right? And so, what I began to see is, communication wasn't as clear, it wasn't as often. People were working in silos. Uh, Again, a great deal of ambiguity and uncertainty, and not knowing how to move forward because no one had ever experienced anything like this before. And still, we don't know how to move forward because the entire model or the paradigm has changed around how individuals will engage in the workplace. So we're seeing more and more people working from home, and that's total disruption. It used to be people say, well, I want to work from home. But now that when you wake up, work is there. When you go to bed, work is there. They're having different thoughts about that.
Because maybe we don't want to be working all the time. And so, how do we start mixing and balancing what we have at work and also at home? I have found from people they love this whole concept of working from home, but they're realizing it's a new reality of I don't have the structure anymore of a work day and a commute and a workplace. Now I have to create that own structure.
Yes, and that takes a great deal of discipline, and not everyone is disciplined. I think you and I were having a conversation, and I said we're at the intersection of intellect and instinct. That's where we are, and so both are required, right? Because instinct is about survival and intellect is about intelligence and smarts and strategy. But being there, not knowing where we're going into the future, that's what makes the intellect a little bit different, because normally when we rely back to our instincts, it takes us to habits that we have formed over a period of time as it relates to survival. But moving forward, we don't know what that is, so that those habits won't serve us well. It'll actually take us back to an older reality, when the new reality in front of us we're not familiar with. So one of the things that I suggest to people is beware of your natural impulses. And when you're aware of those natural impulses, you want to do basically in this scenario of not a post COVID-19, but a new reality, you actually want to be counterintuitive to what you would do in any given situation that we would call normal. But in the next normal, you want to be counterintuitive in everything you want to do. You want to move with speed, you want to monitor it, and you have to be able to course correct in real time, understanding that the mistakes that you make or the missteps that you take, they're going to be something that you're going to have to embrace, but you learn from them and keep moving.
This is the reality of what being a leader is, right? We often have this model of leaders who are strong, infallible, have all the answers. And if that's the model of leadership that you have inside of you, you're instinctively working towards that. So intellectually saying, that's what I have to work towards. And the reality is that that's impossible. It's always been impossible, but it's now really evident every day. How do we get through this? How do we start building that resilience? And I think one thing that we were talking about is how we do this every single day.
Yes.
And I think more than anything, right now at this time, with everything that's going on with this week, we're being called upon as leaders to really question our long-held assumptions about how the world works. How do we do this every single day? Where do we find that strength?
That's an excellent question, because I think one of the key words is vulnerability. We have to be very vulnerable. We have to understand that vulnerability is a strength. And it also comes with the question that I like to ask, and I think it's a very powerful question. And that question is, what if? We always have to play the what if scenario, because that allows us to think from a different perspective. It allows us to think innovatively and creatively. It allows us to create scenarios because we're moving forward into a reality that's unfamiliar with us and we don't know. So by playing the what if scenario and building out 3 or 4 scenarios in your head, or putting it to paper, allows you to be a little prepared for what that new reality may be. And you have to be able to embrace uncertainty and ambiguity, knowing that, guess what? I'm not going to know all of the answers, but I have to be able to move forward anyway. It's like a diver, right? If you're a diver and you're going down into the water and the water is a little murky before you get to your destination, you have to continue to trust your instincts and your skills as you move forward in the water.
And my sense is you don't do this on your very first dive. You got to practice this.
Mm-hmm.
This is not something that in that moment of crisis, you're going to just be able to pull out of your back pocket. And what I'm really leaning into these days is, how do I practice doing this? How do I do this every single day? How do I see the humanity in the particular situation that anytime that we're in? And I think one of the biggest problems we have is that we're so focused on the business, focused on the strategy. We forget something that you talked about right at the very beginning, which is that this is about people.
Yes.
And I just feel that so many of the problems that we have is when we're charging forward and we don't take the time to actually slow down and see and feel and lean into that instinct of, how do I relate to people on a day-to-day basis?
That's an excellent point. I have always thought that we were more interested in process and technology than we have been people. And regardless of where we are, it's all about the people, right? We call it's mission first, people always, right? And people create processes, people create technology, people create profit, right? And so humanity is what we have to be in tune with in times like this, because I really think that this time is a time to reconnect with our humanity, not only in the workplace but in society, as we think about the anxiety that people have around their careers, whether or not they're going to have a job, whether or not they're going to have a place to live. And then we consider incidences like George Floyd and what's happened. It's like the perfect storm, right? We had COVID-19, and then we had this another incident of a man being brutalized and murdered basically by a police officer who's supposed to protect and serve. We had a tendency before to forget about humanity. And I think this was the perfect time to re-engage with people as people and understand them. We talk about diversity and inclusion all the time, right? But I think that's a smokescreen because up until now, um, it's been failing, and diversity and inclusion has been around since 1980, and we're 2020, and we're continuing to fail. However, I think this is the point where we have to understand and realize that we're all human. So let's do away with the labels. Let's do away with the titles. Let me just deal with Charlene Lee, right? Not Charlene Lee, not the author, not the analyst, but let me deal with Charlene Lee, the person, and get to understand who the person is and what inspires and what motivates and what troubles from time to time. Again, that whole vulnerable piece.
It reminds me that so many times when I am out and about, just around the city doing things, uh, and people don't know who I am, it's there's a certain sense of being vulnerable out there. And am I going to be seen as a person? Do I see other people? And is there a sense of fear and of anxiety because will I be seen? And because I'm not seen, can I see other people? There have been circumstances where I'm like running, I'm so busy, and I brush by somebody and I kind of mumble like I'm sorry, but I don't stop to say I'm sorry.
Mhm.
I didn't see you. I didn't see you as a person. I just saw you as another obstacle in my way to get to the place where I need to be. And that's what it's just when we do this every single day that we start losing that humanity. We don't practice that.
Mhm.
So I think in so many ways, and you can speak to this too, this is a moment when all of us need to stop and say, this is not a police issue. This is not a medical issue. This is a human issue that we
Yes,
have to deal with every
yes,
single one of us to get to
yes,
the place we need to be.
yes. This is truly a human issue. It's human beings having to reconnect and relate to each other, because at the end of the day, we came here the same, we're going to leave here the same. Everything in between really doesn't matter, right? Unless we really connect to people and get to understand them, their perspectives, who they are, why they do what they do, why we do what we do, regardless of the hue of our skin, right? It really doesn't matter because I want the same thing out of life that Charlene Lee wants out of life. And other people want the same things out of life that we want out of life. And so, as human beings, we have to depend on other human beings in order to get things done in our life on a day-to-day basis. And so one of the best things we can do is control the controllables. And in controlling the controllables, the most important thing we can control is us as individuals. Let me control me. Let me control how I engage, how I communicate, the image that I give off, the vulnerability that I actually am. Let me control that because that's going to enable me to hopefully be more effective in engaging with human beings on at a human level and eradicate the dehumanization and the objectification of people.
I love that point. You talk about control, right? And we think about leadership as command and control, and that we're controlling things, a situation. In the end, you're not really in control. It's like
Yeah.
this fallacy, right? I love how you turn it because you're saying the one thing that you can control is your emotion, your vulnerability. Because when you can feel confident that you can be in control of yourself and be vulnerable, there's so much strength in that. So much strength in that.
Absolutely. That's really the only thing that we can control, right? Is us in what we do and how we treat others. That's we have to be mindful, right? And grateful and resilient. I heard a an equation that says rhythm plus ritual equals resilience, right? Because In order for us to challenge the status quo on a day-to-day basis, we have to interrupt our rhythms, right? Our rhythms are our habits. And so we have to do the little things that enable us to challenge the status quo. Little things simply is taking a shower at a different time in the morning. Little things like Charlene Lee waking up to do an interview at 6 a.m. in the morning, and she's on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast at 9 a.m. The little things that on a day-to-day basis enables us to better embrace disruption because we're disrupting ourselves, right, on a day-to-day basis with small steps that enable us to be able to be more agile, if you will, and to challenge. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm a scholar of the Bible, but what I do know in the Christian doctrine, Jesus challenged the status quo every day. And as a leader in challenging the status quo, you ask yourself or you ask your people, is this the best that I can do on a
Right.
daily day basis?
And I love the fact that you bring in scripture into this because oftentimes say that Jesus was the ultimate disruptor in so many ways. We're still talking about him now, 2,000 years later. I want to say hello to a couple people online. I love some of the things that people are saying. Nadia has this great point that transformation won't happen until individual transformation happens. I really love that because it says we can't hope to transform the world unless we're transforming ourselves. And also from LinkedIn user, I know I've seen you before. I just don't know your name. He's loving your wisdom, Terry. And he says we can't live without the help of other humans in our life. We are fundamentally social creatures.
Yes.
Right. So one of the things I want to talk about as we're closing out is what are the things that you are advising? You talk to leaders every single day. What is the advice that you're giving to them to help them move through COVID, through all of these questions around justice and dealing with inequality? What advice are you giving to them and some of the words that you can give to us about how do we move through this world? How do we think about it, act on it?
I would say one of the first things you want to be able to do is listen with intent. Be very engaged in the listening process as others are communicating with you. You want to clearly understand as a listener what they are saying and interpret it as they would like for you to interpret it, right? That brings about clarity and it brings about effectiveness. One of the challenges that we have in this country is we don't like to listen to people. And that's what's caused this whole George Floyd situation. No one was listening to the voice of African Americans talking about police brutality. And that is a result of the lack of avoiding leadership because the first thing a leader is supposed to do is to listen to his people. That's one of the first things. What a leader also has to do, and what I'm seeing is I say communicate on steroids. You got to put your communication system on steroids, right? Because people are seeking clarity, people are seeking stability, right? And they're anxious and they don't know. And it's a leader's job to provide that roadmap. And I'll tell you, as I read your book, there was something that really stuck with me. And it was skate to where the puck is going to be. That really stuck with me because oftentimes that's not happening. We look at where the puck is, right? And we see the puck, so we skate to where the puck is, but no, we have to anticipate. And so what I've been talking to leaders about is a model called ADAPT. And in that ADAPT model, the A stands for anticipate, which means I'm going to skate to where the puck is going to be. And D, I'm going to drive. Once I understand, I'm going to begin to drive in a direction that enables me to embrace ambiguity, uncertainty, to make missteps, and to continue to learn as I move forward. And the second A would be accelerate. Once I drive in a direction, I have to accelerate because speed is of the essence in this economy and moving forward into in uncertainty. And then I'm going to partner, meaning I'm going to collaborate with people around me and leaders. I'm going to listen to those on the front lines because they're so involved in everything that's going on. That's where I'm going to learn. And then, most importantly, that ties all this together is trust. I have to be able to trust my movement. I have to be able to trust the movement of others. That's the key to empowerment, right? Is to trust, because we know as human beings we can't do it alone. And so we are social beings, we are social creatures, and we have to trust each other to make not only organizations better, society better, and the world a better place.
Hmm. I love that you end with trust, because that's what it's all about in the end. Do we trust that the people we're standing next to, standing in front of and behind, are going to be there? Are they going to be there for me? Right? And it's only when that happens, and we have to deal with everything against that.
Yes.
I love to listen as a foundation that you talk about, because it goes back to almost 2,000 years ago. The Greek philosopher Epictetus says that we were born with 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use them in those proportions, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, it's great. I want to just acknowledge some of the people who are just chiming. I don't know if I know you can see this here, but I think Shannon says that just she loves the fact that you acknowledge that it's all about people and our ability to relate to others. I mean, it's what we're hearing here is from Jennifer also, listen to understand, listen to really know. And I think in the end, that's all we ask as people, is to be heard, to be seen, to be known, right? And if that's the one thing that we can do for each other every single day, then we'll make progress.
Yes, absolutely. We have to listen to understand, right? That's what makes us effective, right? That's why when I hear people in organizations talking about we want to be efficient, I'm like, well, you can be efficient and not be effective. And I give you an example. I have a car that gets 70 miles to the gallon, but if I'm going in the wrong direction, it doesn't matter. I'm efficient, but I'm not effective. So initially, I want to be effective, and in order to be effective, that means I need to be able to clearly understand what someone is saying and interpret it as they would like for me to interpret it, so I can begin to apply that learning and that knowledge based upon what they told me.
I love that. Love that. I love that analogy, by the way. You could have a really good functioning car. I just imagine getting in the car, right? And we see this so often. The people are having their heads down and like, can't put my head up because we just got to go. We just got to go. But if you're going in the wrong direction, or I like to say, driving with a rear view mirror, you're looking in the past to figure out where you're going to go into the future. You can't go fast down the road unless you're looking far down that road.
Absolutely. And the listener who and the viewer who talked about transformation, right? It begins with the individual. And we are truly in the midst of transformation, because the way we engage in the future is going to be like we've never engaged before, because of all of the different restrictions, because of COVID-19. But this is truly the caterpillar becoming the butterfly, and the butterfly never goes back to being a caterpillar. And so that's the difference in transformation versus change. See, in change, the example is I can decide that I want to lose weight, and I can lose 10 pounds and I can keep it off for 6 months. But at 12 months, I could have regained that 10 pounds plus more. And there wasn't a paradigm shift or a shift in my habits as to what I had to do to maintain the change. And so transformation in and of itself is totally different. And too often we like to be able to use change and transformation synonymously, but they're actually not. And transformation is a journey, whereas change can actually be a destination.
We're going to close it out now at this point. One last question. I think this is a great one. What's the one piece of advice you would give to leaders of the world right now?
The one piece of advice that I would give to all leaders right now is listen to what your people need and what they want. Become an expert listener And I think it was Zig Ziglar said, you can get anything in the world that you want if you just listen to what your clients want, and then you can give them what they want. That's the easiest thing to do. Tell me what it is that you want, and I get that by listening. And so with that, I just need to be able to listen, and leaders need to be able to listen.
Thank you so much for that.
You are welcome.
Terry, where can people find you, connect with you, follow you, your
Well,
wisdom?
thank you. You can find me. My website is jcgconsultinggroup.com. You can contact me there. You can also find me on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I am Terrence Jackson, PhD. And or you can Google me, and you'll find me any number of articles that I may have placed out there as well. So, Charlene, I want to thank you so very much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be on here with you, and I'm thoroughly enjoying your book, and it is going to be a roadmap that I use with organizations. If you're not familiar with Charlene's book, let me give you the title. It's called The Disruption Mindset: Why Some Organizations Transform and Why Others Fail, and it's an excellent read.
Well, thank you, Terry. I didn't bring you out to necessarily about my book, but thank you so much coming from you and knowing that the impact that it's had. Thank you so much for that. Terry, thank you so much for joining us today. And for those of you watching, thank you again so much for joining us. Thank you for watching this broadcast. Go out there, listen with your heart, disrupt every single day, find that resilience. I love the acronym ADAPT, Terry. Thank you so much for giving to us.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.